I'm Tracey Miller,
And I'm Tara Whitney.
and I wrote the women's self-care journal called This Is Me, Inquiries, Exercises, and Ideas for Living Your Healthiest Life.
And I wrote Hungry, Trust Your Body and Free Your Mind Around Food. This is a nice way for us to circle back.
Yeah.
Because has it been like 6 years?
At least 6 years.
At least 6 or 7 years when we first crossed paths at Blue Moon. I owned a yoga studio right in the back side of Water Street, and Tracey, you were at the time doing a lot of coaching around health and wellness.
Yeah.
And we came up with this idea of offering our own community tools for transformation.
Which was awesome, and it was a great way for us to bring our tools together, and you were really focusing on the kind of mind, body, and the yoga, and
Yep.
more awareness, and I was focusing on the food. And so we brought together a group of women and talked about tools for transformation and gave them some ideas of how they could become more aware of their body and what they ate and how they took care of themselves. And really that was many years ago, and we've probably both learned a lot since then and have really evolved to write books and basically bring everything that we had learned for ourselves and that we had helped other women learn, and their stories come together in our books.
Yeah. I mean, I think back then we recognized a really important need of having like a different conversation that wasn't just about the typical things that people were getting from modern or just mainstream media.
Yeah.
And I think through our own experiences too, you had your own shifts in your relationship with food, and as have I, but I also wanted to offer really what was powerful for me about yoga and mindfulness.
Every woman is on her own journey to try and figure this out, because it's not like we were taught how to take care of ourselves when we were young. I mean, we ate what our parents ate. We did what our parents did, and there really wasn't a class about self-care. And so it's this never-ending journey that is us trying to figure out what makes us feel good in our bodies and what makes us feel good in our life. And you know, I feel like our health permeates every single aspect of our life. We look for the answers outside, and we don't trust that we have the answers inside. So it's really that inner work and feeling in control and empowered that we do have the answers, and that we can trust our bodies and listen to our bodies and slow down so that we can hear those little whispers in between telling us, you know. And I think as women, we just push, you know, and think that that's all we need, you know, and then society is telling us to count calories and be a certain weight, and that just makes it so challenging. So
Yeah, absolutely. So it was really like planting a seed, I would say.
yeah.
And so now it's really fun to come back and share our own books,
Yeah.
because I didn't know you were writing a book. I don't think you knew I was writing a book.
Yeah.
I didn't
No.
really tell too many people.
I didn't tell any. I told like 3 people. So
You told like 3 people?
all of a sudden I
then
announced
you're
I'm
like-
doing a book launch, and like, I didn't know you were writing, and it took me a year.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it was like, I had to hunker down,
Yes.
and I just was like inside myself, and I was so focused because I really wanted to get it done. And it was the process itself. That creative process is so amazing, and it also makes you really think about your health, because you want that mental clarity, and you know, those early morning hours when you wanted to get up and write when you were fresh, and it really makes a difference. So
Absolutely.
so I think a lot of people don't realize that creativity comes when you're feeling healthy and when you're feeling energized and clear-headed, and creativity is a big part of your health, right?
Actually, I think it's the ideal symptom
Yeah.
of elevated health.
Yes. Yeah.
I would argue that if like being in a position of creating, and I knew exactly, I was like, I had this formula, like I knew how much I needed to meditate. I knew how much water I needed to drink.
Yeah.
I had to prioritize other
Yeah.
things to take care of my body.
Yeah.
And all of those things, and when I did that, writing and the flow of information that was coming out just was that much easier.
You get momentum.
Absolutely, yeah. And I really had to make sure that that was a priority. So when did you decide? What was that big shift in you that said, I need to write a book?
You know, I wanted to write a book for ages because as I went through my journey and I coached other women, I wanted to bring it all together in one place. I kept saying, I just really want to have one thing. And it's, for me, the journaling, which is a big part of my book, was really important because we each have our own journey, we each have our own story, and we each have something that we need to bring to ourselves. So writing things down really makes it real.
Yeah.
And so that book was in me probably before I was born.
Yeah.
And then I just was like, I really wanted to be able to share this with other people, just what my experience was and what worked for me and many other women. And I have lots of stories and quotes and things from other women in the book as well.
That's awesome.
So how about you?
I don't know where the idea came from, but it was like I sort of knew I needed to write a book too. Like I wanted to write the book that I needed.
Yeah.
When, like 20 years ago.
Yeah.
That I couldn't find anywhere.
Yeah.
Even though I had read so many other books.
Yeah.
And so it was important for me to write that. And then it was interesting because once I made the commitment to write it, it just...
Stars aligned.
It just came gushing out. I mean, it really... I was telling my husband on the way over here, it probably took me maybe 3 months of more intensive writing. And then the 9 months was more editing, waiting for the editor to get back to me. Like it really came together really quickly. Yeah. And that to me is kind of cool. Like, it was just meant to come out.
Yeah. It's so important for us as women to come together to share our stories and challenges and concerns, because when we bring our little bit of light to something, then hopefully that helps someone else, and vice versa. And that's why tonight we're excited. This is going to really be a good discussion.
A nice, warm, lovely night to be here at Water Street Bookstore. So so we'll start by introducing ourselves. My name is Tara Whitney. I am a certified intuitive eating counselor. I'm also a transformational coach and a CPA. By the way. Not a likely combination, but one that happens to be me. And I wrote Hungry, Trust Your Body and Free Your Mind Around Food. And I work with women to move beyond emotional eating and overeating so they can recreate their relationship with food and ultimately have that influence their whole life.
Hi, I'm Tracey Miller, and I am a holistic health coach and a yoga instructor, and my kind of self-health journey began about 13 years ago, actually. I keep saying 10 years, but I think it's now 12, 13, before I moved to New Hampshire. And I just, it's been a journey for me to learn about my body, become more connected and more aware. And I was a health coach for many years. I still am a health coach. I still have clients. And ran many wellness programs. I worked with Kath Galan at the Blue Moon Evolution restaurant, and just help women navigate their way around their food and their health. And I really loved bringing kind of that more mindful perspective to it, because for me it started out with food, and then I was able to bring kind of the more mindfulness and body awareness to it, which I know Tara's going to talk about as well, which I think is awesome. So just really excited to be here. My book is called This Is Me, Inquiries, Exercise, and Ideas for Living Your Healthiest Life. And really this book is just me kind of pulling everything that I learned to help me on my journey, and that I worked with other women and brought in some of their stories as well. So I added a journaling aspect because I really feel that when we write things down, it really makes it real, because we get so busy in our day that we kind of forget things. So yeah, so it's a journal, and it's a wonderful way for women to kind of write their self-care story.
So Tracey, I just realized something. So we worked together like 6 years ago, and we created this program called Tools for Transformation. I shared that a little bit already. And in this program that we created, I talked all about mindfulness and yoga and body connection.
Yeah.
And Tracey talked all about food.
That's so funny.
And then we went our separate ways, but not really, because we stayed connected and touched base on a few things. And then isn't it funny that we came back around and I'm talking about our relationship with food,
Yeah.
and you're talking about
funny.
my
Yeah.
body. Like, it's just so
It's
interesting how that all worked.
It is, and it's all part of the journey, and that's
Yeah.
the beauty of this. It's like there's
Yeah.
no end. It's just this continual evolvement of where we are in a journey. So.
Yeah. Well, and I think the larger point is that when we think about our health and we think about self-care, food is our natural next piece to it. Although what we do know is that that can be a complicated piece, and it can be a confusing piece. And it is one in which it's important that we understand how food fits into our own health in our own way. So I wrote Hungry, Trust Your Body and Free Your Mind Around Food because I wanted to offer women who was struggling with food the way I had, a book that I would have liked. So I started eating emotionally when I was in middle school, and I started dieting around the same time. And I really made it kind of my mission, although I would have never told anybody this, to try to figure all of these struggles out. And in my mind, what I told myself was, how could I be healthier and how could I be skinnier? And I thought that those two things meant being healthy. But what I was experiencing was a lot of binging and purging. I didn't have bulimia, but I was definitely restricting and then overeating. I was doing a lot of emotional eating, which was one of those experiences where, if you've ever had an experience with emotional eating, it's one of those things where it feels like it comes out of nowhere, and like you kind of feel like you're on autopilot, and all you kind of know is like the aftermath. And I kind of laugh just because it's not necessarily a fun thing, obviously, but it's just interesting how that works. But that was, so my goal was one thing, but then my experience of my health and my relationship with food was really different. And I was in this constant tension between wanting something and thinking I was doing the right thing, but getting this experience where I felt trapped. I felt like I told myself if I could just try harder, then maybe I would fix what was going on for me. Meaning if I had just overeaten, then I would have this negotiation that would say, well, if I just restrict a little bit better, or spend a little more time at the gym, or not eat any sugar for the next 3 days, or whatever the conversation in my head was, then I'd be healthier and therefore maybe even lose weight. And this probably went on for at least 2 decades, this experience. And it was one that I didn't quite understand. And I knew that I was eating emotionally. But what I didn't really realize at the time was I was actually doing a lot of dieting. And I knew I was dieting when I went on Weight Watchers. That was obviously a diet. And it was a formal diet because I joined a program and I paid money and all of that. Even though Weight Watchers is really good at telling you that they're not a diet and they're just a lifestyle, but that's just kind of an afterthought. But really what I was doing was I was always trying to limit how much food I ate. And I was always trying to eat less. And I was counting, when I started doing Weight Watchers, then I kind of got in this habit of counting points, because that's what Weight Watchers does. You count points, and the points at the time was like this calculation between calories, fiber, and fat. It might have changed since then. But so all of this was happening. So it was like I had this experience of thinking I was doing the right thing, and then realizing how wrong things really were, and I didn't understand it. And then when I finally started to understand what was happening, which took a bunch of different things. So first of all, yoga was probably like the door that opened, where I started to connect with my body and recognize I even had a body worth connecting to. All of the transformation that I went under, or kind of put myself through, shall I say, or invited in, also changed my mindset around a lot of things. And that was a lot of the yoga training and such that I did. And then I found intuitive eating, which is right now a well-established, very heavily researched body of work that basically says to reject the diet mentality, to honor your body, to not demonize any foods, to exercise with like gentleness. And it was one of those eye-opening experiences where I realized that it wasn't until intuitive eating did I really realize how disconnected from my body I really was. And intuitive eating was this way of me kind of opening up to letting go of dieting and letting go of the dieting rules that I had, to be able to make the connection that I had with my body an ultimate priority. Because before, my priority was weight loss and my priority was trying to be healthy. And so that was probably, maybe 10 or so years ago that I found intuitive eating and started really becoming in tune with all of that. And so what I share in Hungry is I talk about why at such a young age I thought I needed to be thinner. Like, where did that come from? Why was that a thing? And why did I never question it? And so I talk about how we have these body ideals, not just in this culture, by the way, it's really worldwide. It's very apparent in other cultures as well. And how that body ideal inevitably led to dieting. Like, what I was able to sort out was how, isn't it interesting that if I didn't need to lose weight, I would have never gone on a diet? To me, that was profound. That might feel like obvious in your brains, but for me, it was like, wow, I would never need to count my calories if I didn't think I needed to be thinner. And then when I realized that what was driving my relationship with food was this need to have a smaller body, then I could then take a look at my relationship with food and then shift it. So I also talk about what dieting really does to our culture and how confusing dieting is, and how often we are actually on a diet and we don't realize we are, as my experience was. So part of this is that what I notice is that dieting offers a hope. Dieting offers hope because we have this ideal that if we reach a certain body size, that we will be happier, healthier, and more attractive, maybe even more successful. And we see this everywhere in media, and we see it in a lot of different places that we look, and it's so embedded, the conversation is so embedded, it can be hard to recognize. And so for women who choose to go on a diet, and I shouldn't even say that because what I heard, the latest statistic shows that the average age a girl starts to diet is 8, and that 50% of 6-year-old girls think that their body is overweight. So when in the 1980s, early 1980s, the average age a girl was dieting actually was 12, and now it's 8. So what I'm calling out as diet culture, what I view is really an epidemic. And what I heard recently is that eating disorders are the number one leading cause of death in females among mental health issues. when you look at the mental health spectrum of what the leading cause of death is around females, eating disorders is the number one, 250,000 deaths a year. To me, that's an epidemic. To me, that's a problem. So I talk about dieting in my book, and I talk about the lure of it. I talk about how enticing it is, because we live in this culture in which dieting really is there to offer us like hope that our life will be better, and hope that we will be able to be successful and live a good life. But really what diets do, and I had my own personal experience with this, is by following a set of rules that somebody else created, two things happen. We disconnect from our bodies, and we deem somebody else an expert over ourselves. So what I've seen is that when I talk to women who I'm ready to work with, or they're ready to work with me, and they need support around their relationship with food, I ask them, how often in a given day are you thinking about food and weight loss? And the answer they give me 9 times out of 10 is all the time. So what dieting has done is it has occupied people's brains so significantly that food and weight loss is always on their mind. They're thinking about their next meal, they're worrying about the meal they just had, they're thinking about what the number was on the scale that they just stepped on, and they're trying to figure out how to get smaller. And so those are some things in Hungry that I just called out for what it is. You know, the subtitle of my book is Trust Your Body and Free Your Mind. And it's so important that we actually do that, because not only does, so dieters, 20 to 65% of dieters will actually result in an eating disorder, 20 to 65%. So dieting isn't something that might just be something that like our friends do, or maybe our mother did, or aunt, or even father did. Like, it ultimately results there's a very high probability, a likely probability that it will turn into an actual eating disorder. So as I see it, this real need, this real void of feeling disconnected to our body is really what creates the big struggle, because our bodies know when they're hungry, our bodies know when they're full. And I believe that our bodies know what they want, what it wants to eat, and when they want to eat, how much they want to eat. But diets essentially override that. And so the journey, I think, to really feeling health from the inside out is tuning back into our body and learning how to listen to it. And that was my own journey. We call that, in technical terms, in the intuitive eating world, body attunement, which is just a fancy way of noticing our body and realizing that our bodies hold sensations. They also hold emotions. Our bodies let us know when we feel certain things. And becoming aware of that and honoring those sensations is really an important step. So in Hungry, I talk about how important it is that we are able to get to a place where we can trust our bodies, because they offer us so much wisdom, and how it's so important for us to be able to free our minds so that food isn't always there. You know, what I know now to be true is that if food was still a struggle for me, I would have never opened a yoga studio. If food was still a struggle for me, I would have never founded an accounting consulting business. And if food was still a struggle for me, I wouldn't be coaching women in their own relationship with food. So what makes me feel most passionate about the work I do is I just see that when women are struggling with food and they make it about food, what's really happening is that women's minds are busy and they mistrust their body. And I think those two things are really important missing ingredients for us to be living happy lives. those are things that, you know, if we can teach our daughters and our sons how to navigate their life through as adults, being able to know what it's like to be able to choose their thoughts and have a free mind is a really important thing. But then also being able to have honor and respect for their body is the other really important thing. So that's my story, and that's why I wrote Hungry. Let me see if I can give you a good segue, Tracey. And I think that, interestingly, I've got it. I'm going to cue you up in a second here. So the practices that I was able to take on to tune back into my body, some of them had nothing to do with food. Some of the practices I have in my book are breathing exercises. Some of them are journaling. Some of them are, maybe I got that from you. Some of them is, you know, dropping into body sensation. And some of them is being aware of thoughts. And those things absolutely go hand in hand, are so critical into creating a different relationship with food.
Awesome, thank you.
Yeah.
I was thinking that our books are like perfect for each other. So when you have both, you can use my journal for some of your things. I have a notes section at the end, and I bet a lot of what you say in there really probably goes through the same things that I do, and I just give more space to write it. But I think it's a good combination. So I love that you brought up health and how we associated, you know, our weight with health. You know, these days when we think we're healthy, we go to the doctors and, you know, they give us some good statistics, you know, what's your blood pressure and your heart rate and all those kinds of things. And that's good information. But I love this definition that I read from philosopher Eknath Easwaran. I'm sure that's not how you say his name, but I thought was a good way of thinking about what is our health, you know, who are we when we, you know, live in this planet, and what does it mean to be healthy? And he says that our job as responsible human beings is to make the body and the mind a favorable environment for health, happiness, love, and wisdom to flourish. So a favorable environment, what does that mean, right? How do we gauge that? And the beauty of this is that, you know, we create that environment, that favorable environment, but we also get to define it, right? We create those benchmarks. So we were talking earlier, like for me, when I'm feeling really healthy, I'm feeling really creative. You know I'm clear-headed and I'm energetic and I feel passionate, you know. On the other spectrum, when I'm tired and negative and don't feel good about myself, you know, I know that I need to pick up the pieces and do something different. And it's interesting, you know, over the years I've coached so many women, and there's so many times that they'll tell me something about their health and what made them feel good, and then 2 weeks later they completely forget it, you know, like they said maybe that going off gluten made them feel really good, and then 2 weeks later, well, I don't think so, I think I just made that up in my head. You know, we don't trust ourselves. So, you know, that favorable environment is how we show up in this world. And as I mentioned earlier, our health permeates every single aspect of our life. Our relationships, our sleep, our, creativity, all those aspects of our life. And so when we just define our health by our weight and our blood pressure, I think we're really missing out, you know. And unfortunately, that's how so many people define that. And the food industry and the pharmaceutical industry, and, you know, they have, you know, when you were talking about, you know, knowing when we should eat and listening to our bodies, I swear the food industry created those 100-calorie snacks for women because it was just like this non-guilty pleasure, like, oh, I'll just have 100-calorie snack. So everyone's carrying around 100-calorie snacks. I'm like, you don't really need that 100-calorie snack, but they made it acceptable. So, you know, we define things by, you know, what we hear and what we see. And I think what's so empowering about feeling connected and feeling aligned and honoring our bodies is that we feel more empowered and we feel more in control of our lives. And one of the reasons that I wrote this journal is that, you know, constantly our body is sending us messages every single day. Typically, we are so busy, we don't even hear them. You know, we have thousands, 50,000 thoughts a day in our mind, and they say 90% of them are the same thoughts over and over again. So we literally need to put the parking brake on our life sometimes just to let the thoughts, you know, go in those little spaces in between, you know, those little quiet moments where we can actually hear ourselves. And I think for me, writing things down over the years was the best way of really capturing a lot of that knowledge, because I could go back and see like, oh my gosh, I forgot every time I do this, you know, I get tired, or, you know, usually when I'm down, it's when I'm more negative. And so I was just able to see myself, right? And I think we're so mixed up in all these things going on in our lives all day long that we just can't see ourselves, and we just can't be ourselves. So what I also wanted us to kind of to learn about ourselves is our self-care story, right? This is the story that you were kind of, you know, alluding to, that we think that dieting is the only way that, you know, is going to make us healthy. Or a lot of people have experiences with their mother. This one woman who was in one of my programs said that she had struggled with weight loss her whole life, you know, and she was in meditation one day and she realized that when she was young, her mother was constantly judging people. Oh, they're too fat, they're too skinny, you know? And so she realized that her whole life she just carried those like negative opinions or judgments, and she put those on herself. So she finally could release herself from that because she saw it, you know? She's like, okay, this is not, I don't want this to be part of my story anymore. So, and you know, I wish that we could have like one pill or one solution or one mantra or whatever to figure all this out. But, you know, they say the journey is in this discovery, right? That, you know, even after 10 years, I am still trying to figure things out, but I know that I keep moving in the right direction. I keep moving forward. I keep learning more and more about myself, and I don't feel stuck anymore. You know, there's fewer and fewer times where I just feel like I'm stuck and I can't move forward. And that is the worst feeling, when you just feel tired or angry or, you know, like you're overeating or whatever. I just feel stuck. So for me, this journal is to help you kind of move forward. And what I do throughout the journal, and I was just going to just highlight a few things, some of the tools that we use, and I still refer to them as tools for transformation, is that I help women look back. You know, look back at how their mother and their father, her parents shaped their opinions and messages around food. You know, and maybe it wasn't your parent, maybe it was a coach. You know, maybe they gave you some really positive messages, or maybe they were really negative messages. But we carry that stuff with us, and then we don't even realize that we do. So looking back, like, you know, what brought us to where we are, and then just being more present. And then creating a vision, because I think unless we're really clear on how we want to feel, then we're just going to be going kind of through those motions every single day. And as I said, like every time you start to feel a little bit better, it gives you like, shines a light on like the potential for feeling even better than that, you know? So I just wanted to walk through a couple of things, and then I was going to read something. So as I mentioned, you know, we're women just so daggone busy, right? And we're always pushing through, trying to figure out what we need to get done, look at that checklist all day long. And I feel like, do we ever get to the end of the day and said, whew, success, right? I always feel like it's the next day, we're always figuring out like, oh, I didn't finish this, so I've got the next day, and we never kind of give ourselves that credit. And I think a big part of just being healthy is that self-compassion, right? To stop beating ourselves up about what we did that day, and to be grateful for our health wherever we are, and to not maybe take it so seriously. I think also that we kind of get stuck in that story where we say, oh, I'm just not the kind of person that is good at dieting, or you know, I'm just not the kind of person that likes to exercise. So we put ourselves in these categories, and it really helps inhibits us from moving forward. So as I mentioned, one of the things is looking back and really thinking about how we shaped our messages around how we take care of our body. And through that, I just ask a lot of questions about, you know, how your mother modeled self-care, maybe your father, maybe your siblings, My mother actually died when I was very young, and she died of cancer. So my whole life, all through my 20s and 30s, for me, self-care or health was really about what could go wrong with my body. It was always like, oh no, what if I get sick, or what if, I get cancer? And, that really is not a way to be excited about how you feel. So that's something that didn't even dawn on me until I was like around 40 years old. So you don't realize those messages that you're carrying. The other thing that I think is interesting, a lot of the people that I've coached, we do what I call a health history. And I ask them, what did you eat when you were young, and what did you eat maybe in your 20s and your 30s? It's amazing to me how little diets have changed, that people are eating almost the same thing when they were young as when they're older, and that we sometimes need to just kind of get outside of our box, and for a variety of reasons, because I think foods should be so pleasurable, and also with the nutrients that we get, if we're eating the same foods every day, that we're not getting that beautiful rainbow of nutrients. So looking, what I call it, your food blueprint. So just taking a few minutes and looking at what your diet looks like for your, I say your diet not as in calories, but what your eating program is like, and taking some time to really reflect on that and saying, oh man, I eat the same daggone thing for breakfast every single day. What could I add into my diet to change that up? The other thing that we look at is what I call the circle of life, and that is, when we talk about our health, as I mentioned, our health permeates every aspect of our life. So how in our world today, in our life, do we feel about things like our personal development and adventure and finance and creativity and our family? How is our health permeating out to the rest of our life? And I love this. It's just like a little circle here that you put little dots in the middle, and then you kind of connect the dots, and it gives you a really nice visual of your life, where you need to do some work, and what's working and what's not. The other thing, and I'm sure, Tara, you talk about this a lot in your book, is how's your energy? On an average day, what is your energy like? What is your concentration and your mental clarity like? How's your digestion? Are you popping, Pepto-Bismol all the time? Are you feeling bloated? What are these little small symptoms that you're feeling every day? How's your sleep, right? What's your stress level like? And inflammation, hormonal balance, headaches, and skin. But really taking some time to sit down and look at these things so that you know that what you have to work on, and figuring out what your biggest health challenges are. The other is doing a food and mood journal, and there's actually a journal that you can, like a weekly thing, or 7 days of food and mood journaling. That was the most revolutionary thing for me when I first started on my journey, starting to realize how different foods affected my body. I'll never forget when I was at health coaching school, and someone said, oh yeah, this guy told me that every time he eats gluten, his big toe hurts. And I thought that was the most ridiculous thing I had ever heard in my life. But gluten can cause inflammation in your body, and he had some maybe arthritis or something in his toe, and so it's all connected. But I had no idea. So really doing that food and mood journal is a really, really great tool for your body. And I think as you do the food and mood journaling, you look at your, how you're feeling every single day, then you start to create really that diet that works for you. So what foods in the morning give me the most sustained energy throughout the day? What foods, if I eat a lot of sugar when I go to bed late at night, how does that affect my energy the next day, right? Or, how I sleep. It's amazing to me, just if I eat really late at night, I definitely don't sleep as well. So just getting really clear on those things, and kind of sticking to them. I think gratitude goes a long way. So in the journal as well, there's a gratitude, 7 days of gratitude. It's amazing how that your thoughts, you don't even realize that you're, have negative thoughts, and we're always thinking more, and kind of going to that, the more negative side. So doing a gratitude journal was a huge help for me. And I'll just do one or two more here. The other thing that, as I mentioned before, is defining our healthy. So everyone has something different. Like, what does healthy mean to you? Have you ever really sat down and written down what healthy means to you? What it means to your life, how your body feels, what kind of energy do you have? How does it bring passion into your life? But really creating your own definition of health. How many people have ever done that? sat down and really met, because we kind of go to the doctor and we check the box, and we don't really think about that. So really getting clear on what healthy means to you. So we are our thoughts, right? And we create whatever we're thinking. So if we're going through and saying every day saying I don't have a lot of energy, I didn't get enough sleep, it's like we're just manifesting that into our life. So I think that definition and creating that vision for your health is really, really critical. And I will just end with something that I think is really important, is that in our society, like when you go out and you're going to a birthday party, or you're at some kind of event, and it's so interesting, like if you don't want to eat the cake, like someone's serving birthday cake and you say you're on a diet, everyone says, oh, I get it, I'm so there. But you can't say you don't want to eat the cake because it's not healthy or because it's too much sugar. And people kind of give you a hard time, like, just have a piece of cake, stop worrying about it. And I feel like, it takes a lot of courage to really listen to your body and trust yourself, and not feel like you have to fall into what everybody else is doing. And that's been one of my biggest, I would say, not struggles, but challenges over these, at least the first 3 or 4 years, when I was trying to make changes to my diet and I knew it really felt good to me, and people gave me a hard time about it. Like 10 years ago, there was no gluten-free, and you would say you were gluten-free and people would say, that's ridiculous. Like, what are you doing? So it takes a lot of courage to go out and stand on your, your definition of what works for you, and not feel like you have to explain yourself to everyone. So I just think that's so important when in these days when there's junk food everywhere, and you really have to go sometimes and feel prepared and bring your own food, and know that you won't always have healthy food. So how can you make sure that you put yourself into situations where you're not gonna eat the cake because there's nothing else, or fall into peer pressure. So
can I say something about that, Tracey?
Yeah.
So what I tell my clients is to make their relationship with food their own business.
Yeah.
And I think it can go in any different direction, but for whatever reason, we live in this culture where we post our meals on Instagram, and we share this and we share that, and people will even comment on what you might be buying at the grocery store based on what's on your cart, or maybe you're embarrassed about what's on your grocery store, like, kids are having a sleepover tonight, that's why there's Cheetos.
Yeah.
and really, like, it's nobody's business. Yeah. But for whatever reason, we live in this culture that says it's okay for you to comment on what I'm eating. Yeah. And it can go in a whole bunch of different directions. It can, I was at a conference up at my alma mater, UMass, and a girl raised her hand and said, I feel like I need to eat healthy and show everybody that I'm eating in a healthy way, because I want them to think that I'm like that I want them to think good thoughts about me.
Yeah, be impressed.
Or be impressed. That's exactly it. And so we now live in a culture where we say that there's actually that kind of eating is being glorified. It's like, ooh, you must be a better person if you're eating your kale.
Yeah.
And so my kind of response is like, wouldn't it be interesting if you allowed yourself to not eat that way, and eat in a way that's in tune with your body? And so, but it all comes down to, we're under scrutiny, and then we scrutinize. And I think to get to a place that really fits for us, we have to stay in our own lane. Yeah. And we have to just set aside all the noise, healthy, junk food, meat, vegan, all of it, and just toss it all out and say, what works for me?
Yeah, what works best for my body.
What works best for me, yeah.